Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Aloha Series box set, books 1 through 3 by Jill Brashear, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Book 1, Try Easy. Prologue. Sunset Beach, North Shore, Hawaii, a Saturday in March 1966. Three men carried their surfboards into the glassy blue water of Hawaii's North Shore. The sun was high overhead, and not a single white cloud dotted the blue ceiling of sky. Sunset Beach didn't have the biggest or the longest waves on Hawaii's 208 miles of shoreline, but it did have consistency. Sunset Beach wasn't fickle. It didn't rage during a storm like Waimea Bay or flip riders into somersaults like the backwash of Makaha's Bowl, but it did offer steady year-round waves. For those who sought them, Sunset Beach always offered a wave to surf. The three men were best friends and closer than brothers. They were from different backgrounds, but one thing had brought them together, their love for the ocean. They were the descendants of a sailor, a warrior, and a merchant. They had all been born in Hawaii, but only one of them considered himself to be Hawaiian. The men were three of the best surfers in Hawaii and therefore the world. Each of them had big plans for their future and dreams of a life just beginning. One of them was planning to propose to the girl he had loved since high school. One had just signed a contract with a surfboard company and was poised to compete in every major surfing contest across the world for the next 2 years. The third man was Hawaii's beloved son. At 23 years old, he was already a legend in big wave surfing. He dreamed of bringing Hawaii the world recognition it deserved, and he was willing to risk everything to make a name for himself on the waves. The three men strode into the turquoise waters of Sunset Beach with their boards under their arms and their minds on their dreams. Only two of them came out alive. Chapter 1, Walls of Water, Waimea Bay, Oahu, a Sunday in January 1968. The whole car shook as Keone maxed it out at top speed, racing across the island to the North Shore. "Come on," Keone urged the car. "We're almost there." He rounded the cliffs of Waimea and gasped as the shoreline unfolded before his eyes. He had seen big waves before, but nothing like this. This was crazy, violent, unsafe, perfect. Walls of water 2 stories high sprayed into the air, shrouding the entire North Shore in a lavender-hued mist. Keone slowed down, wanting to remember every moment of the day. There might not be another one like it for years. Then he punched the gas again and headed straight for Waimea Bay. The other surf spots along the 8-mile stretch of sand on the North Shore would be no better than boiling cauldrons of water. They would eat a surfer alive. Only Waimea Bay could handle a storm like this one. Keone screeched to a stop in the church parking lot that overlooked the bay and jumped out of the car. He stood in the same spot where his ancestors had once stood, studying the conditions of the surf. He noted where the waves broke, how many were in each set, and how fast they were coming. People assumed Keone had a magical gift for predicting where the best waves would break and for always being in the right spot at the right time. But it wasn't a gift. It was a skill that had been passed down for generations. Keone's father had taught him how to listen to the voice of the ocean, and his mother had explained how to feel the mood in the wind. Surfing was in his blood. Keone could still remember the days when the locals had said that only gods could ride the wild waves of Waimea Bay. They all said the waves were too big, too angry. They believed the bay was haunted from above by the Hawau in the cliffs and from below by the bones of a dead surfer. Keone had been a child when the locals had been proven wrong. It had been a sunny day in the winter of 1957. Keone was in 6th grade, and his dad had let him stay home from school to watch the Haole surfers from California try to commit suicide on the giant waves. Cars had lined the Kamehameha Highway. Everyone sat on their hoods watching the show. Keone, his 4 siblings, and his parents had climbed onto the roof of their Studebaker and eaten a picnic of fried chicken and macaroni salad while the surfers wiped out. It had been better entertainment than a World Series baseball game. The surfers had been pummeled by the waves and had nearly died, but they had also caught some of the biggest waves Keone had ever seen. "I will catch even bigger waves someday," 12-year-old Keone Makais told his father. I will make our name famous all over the world. Once Keone got a taste of the power of the waves at Waimea, he was hooked. 2 years later, he quit school to surf full-time. He didn't belong in a stuffy classroom all day learning the literature and history of white people from the mainland. He belonged on the water. The ocean became his classroom. Watching the waves strike the sand with the force of a power plant, Keone thought today might be the day. There were a handful of surfers in the water, not really doing much more than clinging to their boards. Keone knew all of them. Rabbit Jones, an old-timer who had been one of the first surfers of the North Shore, looked to be the only one doing any riding. Keone saw the flash of Rabbit's board fly down the face of a giant wave. Rabbit was well over 6 feet tall with a wiry frame, but he looked as tiny as an ant in the giant swells of water. Rabbit made the bottom turn and then got pummeled by the closeout. Keone could hear the groan of the spectators on the beach as he jogged across the sand with his board under his arm. They were all disappointed to see Rabbit go down. Keone scanned the water anxiously for a sign of his friend and sighed with relief as he saw his dark, shaggy head pop up. Rabbit turned toward shore, flashed the shaka sign, and paddled back for more. "Somebody's going to die today," said a woman in the crowd. There was a group of housewives with small children clustered together, watching the entertainment just as Keone had done on that day long ago. Keone reached out and tousled the hair of a small boy of about 10 years old. "Hey, kid," he said, "you want to be out there someday?" The boy tore his eyes away from the waves long enough to nod at Keone. "Yes, sir." "What's your name?" Keone asked. "Benjamin Kealoha," the boy said. "I'm Keone Mackay," Keone said. They shook hands with an air of professionalism as if they were two businessmen getting ready to close a deal. "One day I'm going to see your name on a trophy," Keone said. "Yes, sir," Benjamin said, lifting his chin proudly. Flashing the boy the shaka sign, Keone stepped toward the shore. The waves were slamming the sand. It would be suicide to charge into them while the set was closing out. Keone counted in his head, remembering the pattern he'd observed from the parking lot. When all 5 waves of the set had closed out, Keone dove into the water and popped up on the other side. He started the long, grueling paddle out to the lineup. Every few feet he gained, he was pushed back toward shore by the angry waves. The ocean was determined to keep him from reaching the lineup, but Keone was even more determined to get there. He crawled over the massive waves, feeling the thunderous power of the ocean beneath him. Keone should have been more frightened, but all he felt was a detached sense of calm and the belief that the day to make a name for himself had finally come. These were the biggest waves in the world, and Keone was going to ride them. When he finally reached the lineup, he glanced around at the other surfers bobbing on top of their boards. He saw fear in their eyes. Most of them were wondering how to get back to shore alive. There was only one way back to the beach, and it was back the way they had come, through the violent crash of the waves. Even getting this far was either an act of stupidity or extreme bravery. "Hey, maybe we should go surf Queens," Bones said, hunching over his board while a wave rolled under him, threatening to spill him into the sea. Keone smiled at his cousin. Queens Beach was for tourists, but it had once been their stomping ground. They'd gotten their first rides at Queens Beach, where long, gentle waves caressed the sparkling sands of Waikiki. It was hard to believe those sweet waves inhabited the same ocean as the angry behemoths thrashing the sand of Waimea Bay Beach. Keone watched a blue bump in the distance, sensing promise in its obscure shape. It lumbered toward them, and when it hit the reef, it exploded. The other surfers scrambled to paddle over the top, but Keone turned toward shore, stroking calmly to catch the swell. This was his wave. It would be good to him, Keone could tell. He listened closely and heard the voice of the ocean speaking to him. This wave was going to be a force of nature. Keone paddled as hard as he could, racing to get ahead of the wave. The key was strong paddling. It was essential to stay in front of the wave for as long as possible, although that was an extremely difficult feat when the waves were roaring toward him faster than he could drive his VW Bug. The wave that had been a lump in the sea a moment earlier became a mountain, and it was bent on crushing Keone to dust. The inevitable moment came, and the wave caught him. Keone stopped paddling and let the wave lift him into the air. He jumped to his feet, landing with feline grace on top of the thin, wet board. He kept his weight centered in his hips, crouching low over the board as the wave threatened to toss him off its lip. It was already too late for him to change his mind. If he did anything other than drop in, he would wipe out. He stood on top of the cliff, peering over into the watery abyss. Knowing that one moment of hesitation could mean his death, Keone pushed the limits of time, waiting as long as possible on top of the wave before making the drop. It was moments like this, the split seconds between life and death, that Keone lived for. It was the rush of leaning over and staring potential death in the face that made his heart beat and his blood pump. There was nothing like standing on top of a giant wave, feeling the weight of your own mortality. It was physical and spiritual at the same time. This was Keone's church and his playground. It was his passion, his lifeblood. He inched forward, pushing the narrow nose of his board over the top of the wave. He leaned into the wind, letting the roar of the ocean fill his ears and the rays of the sun shine down on him as if for the last time. He tasted the bitterness of fear mixed with the salt of the ocean and smelled his own nervous sweat. The moment for hesitation was gone. Keone dropped into the wave. His board slid along the moving mountain at top speed. Throwing out his arms and bending his knees in a wide warrior stance, Keone leaned into his toes and plunged down the face of the wave. 1, 2, 3. Keone counted silently, savoring each second that he plummeted into the blue abyss. 4, 5, 6. Keone smiled triumphantly. 7. He settled his weight in his heels and began to turn the long, heavy board to the right. His smile spread over his whole body as he relished the milestone of getting to the number 7. 7 seconds. 7 incredible seconds of sliding, of conquering. The ride had felt like forever, and yet it had gone by so fast. He'd done it. He'd ridden the biggest wave in the world. Keone turned back toward the lineup with a triumphant smile and paddled out for more.